It's a pleasure to introduce Jean Drobnick, who comes from the Ontario College of Art and Design, very well known for all people who studies olfaction for his wonderful smell reader. And he's going to talk on art and atmosphere, curating olfactory art in the Anosmic Museum. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Marta, for organizing this, and Carl for hosting us here. Thank you. Until recently, visitors could not be faulted for thinking that the only smells found in an art museum were to be sniffed in the gift shop. Indian incense accompanied the Victoria and Albert Museum's run of the arts of the Sikh kingdoms, and sticks scented with rose, green tea, and sandalwood celebrated paintings in Vienna's Gallery Belvedere collection by Schiele, Klimt, and others. The Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Art Gallery of Ontario offered perfumes to accompany their exhibitions of Frida Kahlo and Salvador Dali. And for J.W. Waterhouse, Garden of Enchantment, the souvenir shop of the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts was indistinguishable from the body shop, so replete was it with hand creams and soaps evoking the lifestyle of the English countryside. By far the most popular art movements associated with scented products are Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. One can purchase, for example, a bar of chamomile and almond soap with Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night entombed within. And I love the phrase, a gentle bathing exhibition. Or a candle emitting the fragrance of Claude Monet's Bouquet of Sunflowers. On one level, these souvenirs are fun novelties and affordable luxuries that seek to capitalize on the cachet of famous paintings and artworks. On another, they harbor a subtle acknowledgement of aesthetics as an embodied multisensory experience, where an appreciation of visual art is translated into the olfactory. The trend to feature scented products in museum shops is no accident. Store managers are no doubt conversant with and eager to adopt the burgeoning type of sensory consumerism prevalent in a wide variety of retail outlets, where scents are exuberantly incorporated into products and store environments to provide an experiential edge in branding, marketing, and value enhancement. The shifting attitude towards smell, a sense one considered marginal and inconsequential to something appealing and evocative, is driven partly by a proven financial payoff. People like to buy things that smell nice. So it is here that olfaction enters the mainstream acceptance by the museum, through the back door of the gift shop, so to speak, via the medium of consumerism. One could argue that the very existence of these olfactory souvenirs posits a quasi-equivalence between scent and artwork. In the case of Monet's Sunflowers, the scented candle seems to literally attempt to capture the essence of the flowery painting, such that one might call it a distilled life, a still life that has been purified to its fragrant extract. And one might remember that many of the traditional elements of a painter's palette derive from plant products. So scent would be just another example of the traditional palette. More interestingly, the candle performs what could be called a cross-modal aesthetic transfer from vision to scent. By converting the valuable, iconic painting into something affordable that can be taken away and experienced within the intimacy of one's home, the candle bridges the sensory gap that tends to afflict most museum-going. Monosensory art objects being viewed by multi-sensory beings. The aromatic equivalent of Monet's Sunflowers permits a fully embodied, though virtual, imbibing of the artwork. Breathing in the painting is almost tantamount to living within it, to incorporating it within one's being, which is a much different experience than viewing. The point, however, is that the candle subtly implies itself as a substitute for the original painting and asserts the sense of smell as a correspondingly pleasing vehicle for aesthetics. Now that this assertion has been made, the task for institutions at present is to accept the reverse implication. As art can be translated into the olfactory can be translated into art. Despite these claims, one has to be careful not to make the gift shop into too vanguard of a site. Artists, after all, have been creating and installing olfactory artworks in the museum for decades, though there is just starting to be a history and theorization of this genre of work. What the gift shop does provide is a confirmation of a decided cultural shift in the sensory habitus of museum goers, in which smell is not only an accepted experience, but one expected in a wider set of realms. In this talk, I will examine the possibilities of olfactory art in the museum through my own curating of scent-based exhibitions and writings about artists' works over the past 15 years. Through the use of performance, installation, object-based work, and relational projects, the exhibitions I have curated have engaged the olfactory in public sites, alternative spaces, and traditional galleries. I should also say that the curating that I do is under the organization of Display Cult, which was founded by my partner Jennifer Fisher and I. And besides collaborating together, we also collaborate with other selected individuals from time to time. The first project, a performance series entitled Reminiscent, invited audiences to remember the sense of smell and engage with it as both a cultural practice and a physical act. Through self-styled aromatherapy sessions, quasi-scientific experiments, intimate encounters, unrehearsed rendezvous, and indecent appropriations of public space, the artists compelled audiences to engage with the spectrum of smell from the everyday to the abject. The second show, Odor Limits, sought to debunk presumptions about smell as a so-called, quote, limited mode of perception, one with only a rudimentary, fragrant, or foul range. Instead, the works in the show innovatively employed scent to generate thought-provoking insights into cultural difference, spirituality, urban space, and identity, and in this sense, demonstrated the capacity of sense to defy limits and exceed expectations. Other curatorial projects that we've engaged in incorporate smell into more general themes, inquiring into the body and performance. Vital signs, for instance, aim to bring attention to the significant ways in which the non-visual senses contribute to identity, culture, and artistic practice, and how a hegemonic understanding of the senses could be reconfigured. It featured works addressing the six senses, such as a 48-foot wall of marmalade on top, and a broken glass floor that one could walk barefoot on, among others. Likewise, the exhibition Night Sense examined the sensory hierarchy, this time in the context of a nighttime spectacle that appropriated the cityscape of the financial district in downtown Toronto. In the reduced world of the night, sight was defamiliarized to the extent that the conventional sensory economy was upended. Altered sensorial states, such as intoxication, roused by the fumes of a pool of vodka, or queasiness induced by a carnival ride set amidst office towers, were presented, along with a reverie inspired by porta potties outfitted with aromas associated with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. These examples of sensorial curating have several factors in common, which also apply to olfactory curating. The projects were mostly commissioned. That is, the artists were invited to produce new works based on the theme and the site. If a pre-existing work was selected, it was radically revised to fit the circumstances. The works were also context sensitive. That is, they were tailored to the specific conditions of the buildings and locations that they would be situated in. The works were also temporary and performative. That is, they existed only for a designated period of time and oftentimes changed or transformed during the time of their appearance. And lastly, the multisensory works in these shows required participation and involvement. One could not stand back and remain aloof from the art. One had to engage with one's body in order to understand and fully grasp their sensibility. In my curatorial practice, I consider olfactory artworks in much the same way as any artwork. That is, it should be meaningful on a conceptual, experiential, and aesthetic level. I would not treat scent art like a separate category of cultural practice, like, say, some kind of science, olfactory objects, or perfumery, though these aspects certainly influence artists' thinking. My curatorial focus is on works created by established artists that embody the complexity expected of an artwork, such as referring to art history, making socio-political critiques, interrogating notions of identity, and other kinds of aesthetic investigations. As novel as these works tend to be considered by some, they nevertheless arise out of common art world debates and art historical trajectories. Clara Ursitti, mentioned earlier this morning, for instance, transformed the convention of the self-portrait by rendering it olfactively. After submitting herself to state-of-the-art chemical sensors and the expert nose of an olfactory scientist, she had the elements of her odor identified and then synthesized, creating a perfume that captured her essence, literally. And in a similar renewal of a traditional genre, Jenny Marketu revivified landscape painting by compiling an active exploration of the olfactory environment. Rather than merely viewing a representation in the gallery, visitors were invited to venture into the area surrounding the gallery to note its fragrances and odors, and then return to record their impressions onto a collectively produced smell map. And here you have a sense of some of the neighborhood around the gallery on the left, and this kind of carnivalesque, sometimes very ribald graffiti and notations that were then indicated on the map in the gallery. So the medium of scent perfectly fits the post-medium condition of the contemporary era, in which artists are no longer presumed to choose a single medium and remain with it for the entirety of their career. The modernist notion of traditional media, in which every sense possesses a unique and autonomous art form, such as vision identified with painting, hearing with music. This modernist notion has been consistently challenged by avant-garde artists over the past 150 years, who have mixed both the senses and different media in their works. With the collapse of Clement Greenberg's modernism in the late 1950s, under the weight of its own logic, where, after all, could painting go once it became purged of everything except flat monochromes of color? The current post-media period began with the rise of performance, installation, video, and so forth in the late 1950s. In my view, olfactory artworks exemplify a post-media aesthetic by virtue of several characteristics. One is their material range. They often typically involve a number of different substances, such as organic or natural matter, like flowers or dirt. They use technological devices, such as diffusers or HVAC systems. They combine cultural and commercial ready-mades, such as incense or soap, and none of which would qualify as a traditional artistic medium. Olfactory artworks also tend to work across a variety of different media. For example, employing sculpture, such as bottles, addressing atmosphere and sight, meaning installation and architecture, involving audience participation or performance, or more directly incorporating visual, audio, and other types of information. In fact, if one were to consider what the medium of smell was, it would have to be air itself, which can carry visual, auditory, tactile, and gustatory sensations, along with olfactory ones. So trying to isolate smell as a pure medium in the modernist vein would be a somewhat futile gesture. The other two post-media characteristics of olfactory art, interdisciplinarity and the complexification of artistic identity, pertain to the artists themselves. The practice of creating olfactory art is post-media in the sense that artists tend to work interdisciplinarity. They engage any number of media and techniques, and unlike modernist artists who restrict themselves to a single medium, olfactory artists may adopt a host of methods in order to conduct their work, such as synthesizing scents, using air conditioning, gathering materials, conducting experiments on their visitors, and employing new technologies and so forth. Finally, artists operate in a post-media manner because their identities are often multiple, too. Some have training as chemists or scientists, anthropologists, and perfumers, besides also being trained in art. This multifaceted identity is often necessary, since to adequately understand and work with smell, one needs to draw from a range of fields in order to build a sufficient knowledge base. So two fundamental motives drive artists to work with smell. On the one hand, scent provides a raw, primal sensation that is new to the visual art context. Instead of representing an object or experience, odor provides a seemingly direct and unmediated access to the real. On the other hand, the second motive somewhat contradicts the first one, in that it recognizes that smells are redolent with personal and social significance. Smells are indelibly linked to notions of identity, place, memory, lived experience, and cultural sensibility. In other words, scents have meaning. Both motives have merit, though I'd argue that no sensation exceeds some level of cultural reference, for the senses themselves are socially influenced. So curating scent-based artworks involves several challenges, which I'd like to address in the following 5 sections, and which can be summarized as institutional, critical, receptive, curatorial, and sensorial challenges. So the first one, the deodorized cube, relates to the primary challenge for olfactory art, and that is the dominant type of space available at museums and galleries, the white cube. Such spaces are designed for the display of objects through a visual logic of white paint, geometric rooms, and even lighting, to create what Rodolphe Alcouri calls olfactory silence. They are often inhospitable places for any kind of creative or positive olfactory experience due to the eradication of odors and other sensory stimuli that might distract from a focused optical encounter. While a sanitized or deodorized exhibition space could bear a useful purpose for olfactory works in that it offers a clean slate for them to appear in, even pleasant scents can be stigmatized in the context of the white cube. No space, however, is without a scent of some kind, as all indoor and outdoor atmospheres carry olfactory vestiges of human activity and natural processes. Museums are no different, notwithstanding their efforts to provide the conditions for a pure visual experience. Cleaning products can leave traces of their use. The aromas of restaurants and cafes can waft around corners, and over-perfumed visitors can trail clouds through the galleries. Modifications to HVAC systems could provide artists with more flexibility in how air flows and gets refreshed, but can be prohibitively expensive and require extensive engineering. Temperature, humidity, air currents, and the volume of a room are basic conditions that impact the ability of an olfactory artwork to achieve its proper state. Just as lighting needs to be flexible for various types of visual artworks, the indoor volume of air needs to also accommodate different types of creatively designed olfactory experiences. The institutional challenges engendered by scent are not unique to this genre of art. Other types of post-media practices require accommodations by the gallery and its infrastructure, such as performance, sound art, and digital media. In the age of visual saturation, many artists feel the need to re-engage with some kind of tangible experience, and so create interactive bodily works that seek to disturb the sensory calm of viewing. Some works may do this pointedly as a critique of ocular centrism, while others use the non-visual senses to pose alternatives to conventional visual aesthetics. Just as the silent, hushed aspect of museum going has been superseded by the incorporation of audio elements, in this case, a recent example is the Warhol exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in which songs from the Velvet Underground were played alongside the artworks. Other post-media practices activate more complex sensorial engagements. Olfactory exhibitions should take into consideration the individuals who sit with the works during the run of the show. People can wear earplugs to tune out sound, but they cannot turn off their breathing. The physical health of attendants is an important concern, yet placing scent in a gallery can generate intolerant reactions, even when relatively benign. One artist I've written about, Catherine Bodmer, wanted to disperse the scent of Bounce fabric softener in an exhibition, but was prevented by the gallery attendants who worried about potential health effects. Despite being assured that the scent carried no danger, the attendants were intransigent. The irony is that the attendants themselves were chain smokers, so the concern for health seemed a little bit ambivalent. Obviously, some other agenda was played, such as odorphobia, which I've discussed in my Smell Culture Reader. Another example of what I've called censorship, and that's with an S-C-E-N-T, involved an incident with a work by Clara Ursitti, In this case, the offended person was the gallery director herself, who made the unilateral decision to place a cut onion in front of a diffuser, emitting an olfactory self-portrait by the artist. Here, the director felt justified in negating the artwork just because of her own dislike of the smell. The onion, however, probably just compounded the odor, though it may have also domesticated the novelty of the olfactory experience by masking it with a more familiar, if equally pungent, smell. Besides presentation issues, ephemeral artworks pose difficulties for institutions with regard to their documentation, collection, and preservation. Smell is not a sense that can be easily represented in photography, as might be expected, or recorded through the use of technology, such as sound. Depending on the type of olfactory artwork, some forms of documentation would work better than others. For performative works, a video would be useful, and if actual samples of the scents are available, like those provided by Chrysan Stathakos' wish machine, audiences would be able to experience the scent beyond the circumstances of the show. In this case, for $1, Stathakos' machine dispensed a vial of essential oil to be taken home and utilized in support of one's soulful aspirations. Most olfactory artworks, though, do not result in a tangible object that can be easily put into storage, and in fact, depend upon ephemerality as a pronounced conceptual aspect. Its non-collectible nature is precisely the point. The second challenge is critical. The second challenge for scent art is to develop a conceptual framework. Post-media art forms that utilize the non-visual senses have a less established aesthetic discourse and are just beginning to be given critical attention. For instance, visual art has 2,500 years of philosophical scrutiny informing it, while olfactory aesthetics has been only intermittently developed in the past century. A more pernicious challenge is that the non-visual senses tend to be considered by those invested with ocular centrism as very visceral modalities, which is something of a false assumption because vision is just as embodied as any other sense. And thus, because scent is visceral, it is unavailable for our higher cognitive or aesthetic pursuits, as Emily has discussed. The limited vocabulary of smell gives the impression that it is mainly a phenomenological experience, one that lies before cultural conditioning or beyond the ability of language to encompass. While some attribute this to scent's intrinsic emotionality, and there is a direct link between the olfactory neurons in the limbic system in the brain, which supports this rationale, my belief is that more needs to be done to develop an olfactocentric discourse. In my experience with olfactory curating, gallery goers are more than intrigued by the exhibitions, but critics are challenged in how to address the work and often fall back upon tired stereotypes about the non-visual senses because they do not speak or represent in the traditional ways they have been trained to identify. Bad puns abound in headlines on almost any smell-related news topic, which betrays a nervousness about considering the significance of scent. Smells intrinsically challenge ocular-centric thinking and the hierarchy of the senses, and so olfactory art is often subject to critical backlash. A typical ploy by those invested in the supremacy of vision is to trivialize smell by making prejudicial comparisons, such as Leonardo's Mona Lisa versus dirty socks, as if such an illogical pairing meant anything. Such odorphobic responses are rare in the general art audience because those interested in contemporary art are markedly more open to new experiences and perceptions, smell included. Many writers point out the lack of terminology for smell, and for curators and olfactory artists, it is thus a necessity to expand and even invent a vocabulary and theory for an olfactory aesthetic. And in my own writing, I've been forced to create many neologisms to identify some of the smell's characteristics, and this is my primary excuse for doing so. The third kind of challenge is reception and variability. Curating olfactory artworks is challenging because of the variability of smell itself, which occurs on several levels. Scents themselves are famously subjective, to the point of being highly idiosyncratic. People form all types of personal associations and judgments about smells from the vicissitudes of their experience, which can make a shared language of scent seem impossible. Any smell can be imprinted with a range of emotions, depending upon the contingencies of one's life. For instance, skunk may be disgusting to many, but for those who smelled its pungency during summer drives in the countryside, it may bring about a pleasurable reminiscence. The reverse could also be said to occur. Smelling an ostensibly good scent, like a bouquet of roses during an emotionally trying time, such as the sickness of a loved one, can turn an oft-cherished fragrance into something to avoid. But those who consciously attend to sensory phenomena, whether smells, sounds, tastes, and so forth, can realize a broader range of meaning and a world of nuance. Every new scent experience adds to and complexifies previous ones. And so encountering olfactory art in a gallery provides a situation for re-examining smells from any time in one's olfactory memory. Less idiosyncratic, but still demonstrating variability, are the positive and negative attitudes towards smell gained through socialization. Every culture privileges some scents while disdaining others. What is an acceptable household or bodily fragrance in one community could be anathema elsewhere. Even scents that are culturally acceptable in one context, such as garlic in the kitchen, may be deemed unacceptable in others, garlic at the office. The stigmatization of smell over the past 2 centuries in the West has somewhat inured many to any favorable or creative possibilities. Those from non-Western cultures, however, may not be so predispositioned against smell and may easily recognize its contribution to knowledge and aesthetics. And it's also the case that being confronted by a new scent, one may not be completely informed about the implications of its presence. Robert Hoole's installation of sweetgrass in an installation called Hochelaga filled the gallery with a soft, hay-like scent that was pleasurable to many visitors, but it held special relevance for those knowledgeable about First Nations politics, lands claims, and medicinal traditions. More insidiously, smells that are comfortable and familiar for members of one community may elicit strong or even racist reactions by members of another. Majestic Splendor, Lee Bull's installation at the Museum of Modern Art, featured an arrangement of rotting fish covered in sequins and jewels in vinyl bags. To the artist, the decomposing odor was a common presence in Korean cuisine, although many MoMA patrons felt otherwise, and the show was prematurely taken down. And it certainly didn't help that the installation occurred right on the pathway to the museum cafe, which I think was the ultimate reason for taking it down. The variability of each individual's sense of smell also has to be taken into account. Everyone possesses a smell blindness into one odor or another. That is, an olfactory receptor that has been incapacitated in some way, and so cannot sense its corresponding odor. The sense of smell employs about 400 different receptors, which are attuned to specific ranges and types of odor molecules, and not all of which are functioning in every individual. By contrast, vision only employs 3 sets of receptors. So rather than just a handful of variations that can affect visual acuity, smell offers billions of ways in which people can differ. Effectively, every nose is unique, and everyone's sense of smell is partial because of the inherent variability in genetic makeup. Furthermore, up to 15% of the population experiences some type of olfactory dysfunction due to aging, disease, injury, or congenital conditions. Nor is the average person's sense of smell uniform throughout the day. Naturally occurring hormonal cycles and respiratory rhythms can affect olfactory ability. Seasonal effects, such as winter colds, summer hay fevers, and other allergies may impede sensitivity. So no artist or museum can predict or cater to all of these contingencies to guarantee every visitor the same scent experience, and so must accept that a range of responses will accompany any olfactory artwork. So besides variation in the act of reception, mutability could also be said to characterize the very nature of olfactory aesthetics. Unlike the bounded, defined aspects of visual artworks in a gallery, with autonomous spectators separated from the objects on view, olfactory art engages visitors immersively. If the scent is dispersed in the air of a gallery, one enters into the artwork. Olfactory artworks are also more visceral since the act of breathing compels the absorption of airborne particles into one's inner being, where these scents will sometimes interact with a person's body chemistry and perhaps even influence their emotional state, their heart rate, or other physiological functions. Inherent to an olfactory aesthetics is a gradation of scent as individuals move about a space. The intensity waxes and wanes, especially if there is a specific source or airflow to disperse and refresh the scent. In this way, olfactory artworks are performative. They come and go, appear and subside, become present and then fade, with all the vividness and ephemerality of an event. And then contrary to the discrete objecthood of visual art, olfactory works manifest a level of suggestiveness because audiences are not typically trained to attend to and identify scents. Variability thus infuses visitors' contemplations as they have to answer basic questions such as, is there a scent? And what scent is it? Even before asking the more demanding, why is there a scent here? And what does it mean? And this is the case in Hugh Pocock's volume, which dispersed water that had been drilled on the museum property and then distributed through the HVAC system. So it was a completely invisible and scentless artwork. The fourth challenge is curatorial. Curating involves issues of context, choice, placement, installation, maintenance, and identification, but our olfactory artworks generate new variations of these activities. Because smells are conveyed by air and air circulates, the boundaries of olfactory artworks can exceed conventional visual and architectural features. The result is that two or more olfactory artworks may overlap and interfere with each other. This is most often encountered in group shows, where the preservation of a distinction between artists is crucial, but can also occur in monographic shows when multiple scent pieces can potentially compound one another. Even a scent artwork with a temporal dimension will require careful timing and airflow if the sequence of aromas diffusing over time is to be kept clear and discernible. This is a problem in Alex Sandover's synesthesia, which showed the progression of cooking Thanksgiving dinner. So it went all the way from rolling dough, baking the turkey, to cleaning up afterwards. But it was done in a gallery space that virtually had no way to refresh the air. So what happened was the scents, you could almost sense the progression, but they built up into a kind of big muddle that I think worked against the overall intention of the artist. So there's a number of strategies that can be employed. I mean, the easiest one is to put each olfactory artwork in a different room, or try to choose olfactory artworks that convey smell by different means, such as scratch and sniff, or multiples, or interactive. And also to repurpose unconventional spaces, such as hallways, closets, other spaces besides the typical gallery situation. There's also another thing curators have to take into account, and that is olfactory fatigue, which is a perceptual numbing specific to the sense of smell, which does not occur too readily, but it does occur. It's a very dramatic condition where your sense of smell shuts down. Perfume counters use coffee beans to help people refresh their sense of smell. But it's similar to museum fatigue, although olfactory fatigue tends to happen a bit quicker. So it's something that curators should keep in mind so that they pace the viewing of olfactory artworks. And olfactory artworks, because they're performative and ephemeral, tend to need to require maintenance to retain their fragrance. So depending on the artist's intention. With Osvaldo Macia's Smellscape, this maintenance involved putting fragrant beads into the boxes every couple of days just to keep the scent going. Other artworks rely on just letting them go letting them exist and just keeping one's hand off. And this is a bed of 10,000 Roses by Anya Galeccio, which smelled lovely for the first couple of days, but then gave way to the odor of decay over the course of several weeks, in which they wilted and decomposed. And this is the artwork on the cover of the Smell Culture Reader. So there's a spectrum of olfactory artworks. Some need maintenance, and some just need to be left to natural processes to take place. So curating scent works involves an olfactory balancing act. If smells are too subtle, the audiences may miss them entirely. If they're too intense, they may alienate that audience. But this is part of the perceptual experience of smell. It can be ethereal suggestive or physically impactful. In some cases, an artist might seek to overpower and discomfort visitors with a confrontational smell. Other artists may wish to subtly lure them or accentuate the mysterious. The curatorial challenge is to support the intentions of the work, be it installing the work to its best advantage and inviting the audience to experience the full range of works without any one work overruling all of the others. I think I'm going to skip ahead because I think my time is running out. But one thing I wanted to mention, and maybe we can follow this up later, is at a conference in New York, there was a lot of discussion about art museums scenting the atmosphere. And I would suggest that if institutions, especially galleries and museums, are going to use environmental fragrancing, that it be left up to artists and named individuals to produce these interventions rather than institutional ones for a variety of ethical reasons. So my last category of curatorial of challenges to olfactory curating is one about recalibrating the senses. Given the general anosmia of Western culture, the structured aromatic experience posed by olfactory artworks presents an opportunity to enhance the appreciation and knowledge of smell. Every encounter with an olfactory artwork also doubles as a type of sensory recalibration that prompts audiences to inquire into the significance of scent and its aesthetic potential. In this way, olfactory artworks tend to be participatory. They oblige audiences to use their senses differently. To invite people into these situations, artists have devised a number of means to bring about involvement, such as using playfulness, reverie, exploration, and aspiration. Play and humor are characteristic of Peter de Couper's work, such as Scented, O2, which featured a concrete fueling station with gasoline nozzles that dispensed the smells of grass, bubblegum, and car exhaust. Poetic Travel informed Millie Chen and Evelyn von Mikulovsky's The Seven Scents that had visitors reclining on the boardwalk of Lake Ontario to contemplate the watery horizon and inhale the scent of oceanic travel. An exploratory urge compelled individuals to open and sniff 5 garbage cans with distinctive aromas in Oswaldo Macia's One Woodchurch Road, an olfactory portrait of his London apartment building and an indication of the country's cultural diversity. And a personal touch informed Shauna Dempsey and Laurie Merland's Scent Bar, where attendees answered a questionnaire about their fears and ambitions and were given a custom-made therapeutic aroma to guide their self-improvement. Each of these, and this is the production of this individualized therapeutic scent. This is one that I received, and it's a mixture of Grandma's Purse and Spotless. The artists haven't told me what that exactly meant, but it's still evocative anyway. So each of these works sharpen visitors' awareness and skill in differentiating scents and exemplify the ways in which scent can analyze aspects of contemporary life. It is important to note that all 4 projects mentioned above incorporated what are ostensibly bad smells. While it may be common sense to know the difference between a good and a bad smell, it is precisely such notions of common sense that olfactory art interrogates and critiques. Smell has often been a marginalized sense in Western culture because of the antipathy towards bad smells. A powerful strategy used by artists has been to deliberately estrange the audience with allegedly negative smells in order to address how such judgments arise. For instance, Teresa Margoli's vaporization diffused the water used to wash corpses into the gallery air. A sign posted at the entranceway informed visitors of the origin of the foggy mist. While the water was sterilized and posed no health risk, its abject nature set forth a challenge. How close does one want to get to the dead? Inhaling vaporization's mist brought about a conscious connection to those who have passed away, and I would say underscores the fact that every breath taken, whether inside or outside of the installation, contains particles of the deceased. Such proximal edginess can be also found in Clara Ursiti's dating service, Pheromone Link, in which those interested in selecting a partner must break the taboo of sniffing strangers' body odor. The work of both Margolies and Ursiti recognizes how olfaction in the medium of air can be confrontational, especially in regard to assumed notions of disgust. But the works pose an opportunity to reflect on the construction and the necessity of such societal normativity. So my talk began with pleasurable smells in the gift shop and ended with two artists dealing with the disgusting and the taboo, a trajectory that has a deliberate objective. Smells are present in contemporary art not simply because they are enjoyable. It is because they are, to paraphrase Claude Lévi-Strauss, good to think with. Olfactory artworks utilize air as a medium and orient audiences to consider the meaning of what they sniff. For curators, the use of smells creates challenges that require mediation on several levels, as I have tried to articulate, between the artist and the institution, between the artwork and the site, between the artist and the audience, and between the artwork and notions of aesthetics, art historical traditions, and societal norms. In providing a sensorially complex encounter, olfactory artworks and exhibitions turn the Anosmic Museum into an animated smellscape that is pluralistic, post-media, culturally diverse, and more fully embodied. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a lovely talk. I actually have several questions, so maybe I just ask one or two and then let other people go in if there is time. So you repeat twice, I think, or maybe three times that sense have a meaning. Mm-hmm. So when we say that a sentence has meaning, sometimes we find out that it's false. That it means that the speaker is not wearing glasses, but actually you are wearing glasses, so that sentence is false. So are scents false too? Can they be false?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question, and there is a sense, there's a way in which sense cannot say no. And artworks, I think in general, because they provide tangible experiential encounter, there's always going to be some kind of positive statement made by that tangible encounter. But that said, scents can certainly be deceptive. They can lie, and they can provide irony. So I would say it's difficult for an artwork or a scent to say no, but or to have, but they can have lots of other variations of being able to be deceptive. Yeah.
I guess I was trying to imagine what it would involve for a scent to be false or to be, not to be deceiving, because of course that's slightly different, but just...
Well, or illusionistic.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And I couldn't come up with...
Virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways other than just deceptive, but I mean, yeah, it can imply that it's something else.
Okay, maybe I ask another one, just quick question. Also, at the very beginning of the talk, you were drawing a parallelism of curating in museums for visual art and for scents. And again, I was thinking, in the same way in which we sometimes go to exhibitions which are realistic, pictorial, I don't know how to describe it, but they're supposed to represent people or landscapes. But we also go to exhibitions which are about abstract art. Are there abstract smells
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think, smells that don't have any referent.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why it is, in one of my first articles on olfactory art, I listed 8 categories of scent-based work, and abstraction was one of them. And what I would call abstraction in scent-based work are works that deal with air in and of itself. So there are works, I think Teresa Margolis would almost be called an abstract work because it deals with air. Hugh Pocock's work, volume, which is invisible, is also quite abstract. I mean, I don't know how you can get more abstract than that. You know, it's invisible. It's
and yet you said it cannot be detected, right? So how do you evaluate that as a piece of art if it cannot even be detected? I mean, that was...
Yeah, so how would the audience know? Well, there were things like signage, there's a pamphlet, he produced a video, there's a photo series of him, drilling the grounds of the museum to extract the water from the underground. So, there are other indicators, but if you're in the gallery,
you cannot
beyond that, how would you know? You wouldn't know. So yes, I would say yes, abstraction is possible with art, with olfactory art.
Thank you.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I was just wondering, this might be an unfair question, it follows up from what the lady just asked. I mean, what sort of evaluative criteria are there for olfactory artworks? I mean, just generally, I mean, what would it be for an olfactory artwork to be a bad one or to fail? I mean, do you have any? Because I ask this because you might ask the same kind of question about a lot of conceptual art, and it's quite difficult to answer in general. But olfactory art seems to be conceptual in quite a specific and new way, one in which most people are unfamiliar with.
Well, this is a broader question that affects art criticism, in general, and to respond to it in a short form, I would say that this kind of evaluative criticism is modernist in scope and is a bit outmoded at this time. This is belongs to the Clement Greenberg era of what is a good work of art, what's a bad one, how do you tell the difference, when is a painting finished, and so forth, those kinds of questions. The art criticism that I think is more predominant at this time in a postmodern, post-media context is one that looks at, well, what issues does the work deal with? Does it deal with them in an insightful, acute, constructive way, or does it fail or does it? It's not about failure. I mean, the evaluative criticism it's almost about thumbs up, thumbs down, failure or success.
Well, but you talked about insight. I mean, so that's an evaluative concept, right?
Yeah.
So every work fails to be insightful then. But I'm just wondering how an olfactory work can fail to be insightful, given that it's so easily connected to social and cultural associations as you suggested.
Yeah, I mean, from my own practice, I look for works that, they're insightful or critical or raise interesting issues. And I think that's what art criticism, the more thoughtful veins of art criticism at this time tend to focus on. It's more about unpacking the art rather than evaluating it. What would be a bad smell work? Well, I don't know. Propose one. Well, one could say that, if it's a copycat work, maybe, if someone's already done it before. But, there hasn't been that many olfactory works. It doesn't have that long tradition. I think, I mean, we're starting to see several artists replicate their own body odor as a perfume. So, Clara Ursitti was kind of the first one to do that. So what does that make subsequent artists doing that? I don't know. The thing is, looking at recent art history, and especially in the postmodern era where it's assumed that nothing is new, that everything's been done before, what would have been considered copying in the modernist vein is now considered generative for a whole new series of work. So what it seems like it's happening in the modernist vein, anyone doing their own body odor would be copying Clara Ursitti, and therefore it's not original. But in the postmodern vein, this is developing a whole new genre of work. So now it's becoming a genre of olfactory portraits, which could have as much diversity and broadness as photographic portraits. So I think one has to have a little bit of generosity to consider what positive outcomes may come of this.
Jim, my question is along the same line as Todd's. You mentioned Clement Greenberg. Maybe one of the problems for olfactory artists is never had a chance to go through the purity issue. By coming along in the post-medium era, so much of it is mixed with other approaches, installation, performance, and so on. Do you make any distinction, or do you think there's some issues there? In other words, what would a pure olfactory work be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm of two minds, even though I said in my paper that the search for a pure olfactory art is kind of a futile gesture, because there's no one single medium that can accommodate smell. I mean, air is the best choice for an olfactory medium. And that, in order to disperse or distribute scent, one has to use all kinds of different means. Sculpture, in case of materials, technology, in case of diffusers, performance, in the case of bodies. So, it's difficult to completely separate scent from every other object around it. But in another way, one could almost say that perfume is already, a quote-unquote pure scent artwork, in quotation marks or something. So perfume has already accomplished that. And as we mentioned in your talk, perfume is kind of it's a compromised cultural product already. So to claim that it's an art is somewhat problematic. So I guess I would say that perfume is, if one is really concerned about a pure olfactory art, perfume has already provided that, and artists can now build upon that, in a different way and not have to worry about.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated to discover that there were so many other people besides Clara Ursitti now doing, quote, perfumes of their own body odor or whatever. Would you, a lot of times when somebody writes about an artist, they'll say, so-and-so is an installation artist, or sometimes artists will identify themselves as a performance artist. Are there, I suppose Peter de Couperet, does he identify himself as an olfactory artist? Are there others? Does Clara Ursitti? In other words, has this become a
genre that people will identify with,
so to speak? I'm an olfactory artist.
Yeah, well, I think olfactory art. Well, when I put my first article out in '98, I did kind of think of creating a genre of. Not creating it, but identified a genre that really didn't have a name at that point. But since that point, it's been almost 15 years or so, there have been a larger number of artists dealing with this topic and this material. And when I first started, there were very few. There were only a handful of artists that specialized in creating just olfactory artworks. And I think still at this point, it's not a huge number. But most of the time, artists were creating just individual works or just a few works that incorporated smell in one way or another. But they also had practices in other kinds of media. So sculpture, multiples, video, and so forth. So that was just something they were exploring along with a range of other issues. But yeah, I think Cecil Tolas would consider himself an olfactory artist, along with Peter, and then a handful of other people. I mean, there is a phenomenon now of perfumers now showing in galleries and doing artworks, doing smell-based works in traditional art institutions. So whether they consider themselves olfactory artists, that would be a question. Would be a possibility.
Yeah, well, it raises, to me, an interesting question. I don't know if anyone else about how, in one sense, scent or smell here, odoriferous materials, are kind of like a new material. It's like talking about clay, glass, paint, and so on. People don't go around saying, I'm a clay artist. Well, some do, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm a painter, I'm a glass artist, so why not? I'm a smell artist.
Yeah, video artist.
Video artist. So get your book out quick so we
can... it's in the process, yeah.
I went recently to the Digital Olfaction Society Congress, and they've got all this smell tech from Japan. I've got some images of it in my presentation tomorrow. And there was one of the tech that impressed me the most was there was this kind of mask that also went over your nose, and it you could see all this beautiful hotel that we were in. You could see your own hand if you held your hand up, and you held they had cookies. And there were pipes coming into the mask, and you held the cookie up, and the computer it recognised the cookie, and it could change the image into whatever you wanted. So you chose what flavour cookie you wanted to eat. They were all exactly the same, these cookies. And they said, do you want lemon, almond, chocolate? I said, okay, I'll have chocolate. And before your eyes, the computer changes it to a chocolate cookie that's in your hand, and then all the smells are piped in, and you eat it, and it tastes of chocolate as well. Yeah. So actually, what they argued was that you needed the visual stimuli to be able to identify what flavour the biscuit was, to actually really believe it. So it was the combination of the factors.
Usually it's the other way around, though. You need the smell in order to identify the flavor, because eating into a potato, raw potato, or an apple is very similar texture-wise and texture-wise, but it's the smell that lets you know whether it's an apple or a potato.